Now, I really question why I tell these stories, but then I always get reminded about how much you guys enjoy the embarrassing stories of my life that are super sus, but at the same time are really relatable because, well, let's be real here. These all happen to like other people as well. It's not just me. It just happens to me the most because, well, I guess I'm just risky like that in my life. But today's story is about something that is super embarrassing, and honestly, it's about getting walked in on. But walked in by who? Well, it says in the title who it is, and honestly, I'm just gonna say it's super embarrassing. So honestly, leave a like and subscribe. And I'm just gonna say this: if this video hits over 4,000 likes, since you guys crushed the last like goal of me shaving my beard, if this video gets 4,000 likes, I will tell a story time in my hot tub. Yeah, meaning I'm gonna be sitting in my hot tub and telling you guys an insane story about my life, which is really embarrassing, but at the same time, I think it's doable. So if this video gets 4,000 likes, I will tell a story time in my hot tub. But other than that, let's just jump into today's story. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and today I'm gonna be telling you guys the most embarrassing story I think I've actually gone through. Probably not the most embarrassing out of everything I've said on this channel, but definitely embarrassing. And this story starts off all back when I was in grade 9. Now in grade 9, that's when hormones of mine were really active. It's when I realized that I was a hypersexual, and when I realized that I was, well, beating the eggplant, meaning that I just could not stop. I think it's gone to the point where like at that age, I would do it like almost 6 times a day, which is not good because obviously I want my testosterone levels to be high, but at the same time, I mean, hey man, it's just hitting puberty, okay? Like I was a machine back then and still am a machine to this day, which is not something I should say and could get demonetized. Can we cut that out? Anyways, going on though, I remember basically back when I was in high school, one time when I was sitting in my room, my dad walked into my room, and no, I wasn't beating my meat at this time. I was actually sitting down playing Call of Duty. When I was sitting down playing Call of Duty, my dad ended up walking up to me saying, "Bubba, we're gonna be going to visit your grandma." And I remember at that moment, I was super excited. Now, if you guys don't know why I was super excited, is because I'm in Vancouver, Canada. My grandmother, she lives all the way in the United States of America. So when we get to go see grandma, in reality, it's, hey, we're going on a vacation to the United States of America, which is awesome. I love the US of A. It's actually really cool. So me being super excited, I remember that moment, I ended up packing up my bags, and the next morning, we basically ended up driving all the way to the United States of America and basically went past the border and drove all the way to Seattle where my grandma was located. Anyways, when we got to my grandma's house, I remember we ended up going in there, we started unpacking everything, and I was relaxing. And I remember one reason why I was super excited was because my grandma actually owned an Xbox 360. So in reality, when I went to go visit my grandma, it wasn't like I was, you know, leaving gaming. It was like I could game at my grandma's house, and she even got the Xbox 360 just for me to play on. So me being super excited and super happy, I remember I brought my Call of Duty Black Ops 2 disc, and I was basically just at my grandma's house playing Call of Duty in the US of A. For you guys, it's probably normal since a lot of you guys are probably in the United States. Actually, what country are you guys from? Comment it down below. I'm actually curious, but I remember basically I was playing games and playing Call of Duty, and I remember I ended up playing for hours on end. Yes, I would enjoy time with my grandma as well, obviously, but at the same time, my grandma would sometimes like to play video games with me, and to this day, I'm not gonna lie to you, my grandma means the world to me. So as you guys can tell, like as me explaining all this, my grandma was a really important person in my life, a very important person, which I would hate if she saw anything bad of me come to life, which happens in this story. Anyways, going on though, I remember one time though, it was getting super late, and my parents wanted to go out and have a good time, going out with my aunts and my uncles, and basically go out and have a good time. And they usually like to do that really late. Maybe they either go to a casino or go to a club or something. But me, I wasn't allowed because obviously I was super young and I was only in grade 9. So what ended up happening was my grandma would actually end up taking care of me and basically watch over me as my family go out and have a good vacation. But me, obviously, I wasn't hard to take care of. If anything, put me in front of a TV, I'm chilling. But I remember it got super late into the night. I want to say like 1:30 a.m. where I ended up basically having to go to bed. So I remember I ended up going to bed and basically laying down in the bedroom that my grandma had set up for me. As I was in there, I remember I was laying down and I was just kind of like not being able to sleep. Like, you guys know that feeling where you lay down but you just can't sleep? And for me, I'm one of those weird people that need to watch YouTube videos or watch a movie or something just so I can go to bed. If you guys are those type of people, you guys understand what I mean. But me, I couldn't sleep, and I remember it got to the point where I was basically just laying down with my eyes wide open, not knowing what to do. So in another way, I found out another way that I could sleep, which was, you know, beating my meat. You know, yeah, beating my meat. I'm just gonna say that right now. I would have to beat my meat for me to get more tired. So me, instead of doing the bad thing, which would be doing it right on my grandmother's guest bed, I decided to basically go to the bathroom, and I sat down in there and I opened up my phone, and yeah, I ended up, you know, watching the Devil's Hub. That was on my phone phone when I was, you know, beating it at my grandma's place. So I'm in my grandma's bathroom, you know, beating my meat, going crazy, you know, doing the typical thing that most guys would do, and maybe girls. I don't know if you girls would do this, but at the same time, us guys are really active compared to women nowadays. But going on, I remember I was beating it, and then one thing led to another. I ended up hearing footsteps around the bathroom. Now at this point, I got super nervous, and I'm like, oh snap, like I think my grandma's outside or something. So I remember I ended up basically like kind of like holding still and just like, you know, just waiting for like this footsteps to go away. But at the same time, I was like actually like really close to like finishing and basically wanting to just finish the entire thing and just, you know, call it a day and just go straight to my bed. So I remember I ended up just basically trying to do a speed run. Like I ain't no small ant or anything, but I basically tried speed running my meat, and one thing led to another. I guess my grandma like heard like something going on in the bathroom. So what my grandma decides to do is just walk into the bathroom and see what's going on. And one thing I will say as well is that my grandma's bathroom did not have a good lock, because for emergency reasons, they didn't want to have a lock on her door in case anything happened to her in the bathroom. So me, as I'm like absolutely terrified, beating it, going crazy, that any moment now my grandma could just walk in on me. Right as like the video is about to end, I ended up busting the devil's cream. And right as I'm like in the middle of, you know, the entire thing that happened, my grandma walks in with her eyes wide open saying, Baba, what are you doing? Honestly, I didn't know what to say, and I was just really embarrassed, just sitting there going, okay, grandma, listen, I'm becoming a man now. Like I didn't know what to say. But then I remember my grandma ended up closing the door right away, and she just said like, you know, finish up, we'll talk about this after. I ended up going, you know, out of there. We ended up sitting down on the bed that I was supposed to be sleeping on, and she basically explained to me how, you know, I'm becoming a man and stuff, and that, you know, you need to control myself, you want your testosterone levels high, and blah blah blah, all this stuff about how, you know, watching the devil's hub is like unhealthy and stuff, you know, basically the basic talk that you get in school and also from your parents. And yeah, when my parents got home, luckily my grandma and I did make a promise that we would never tell anybody about this story. But at the same time, this was back when I was in grade 9. And, you know, the fact that she kept that promise to this day really warms my heart. But at the same time, on this YouTube channel, only the truth comes out. I remember I was beating my meat to this video game, and then out of nowhere, my grandma walks in saying, Baba, what did I just buy you? And I knew it was the biggest mistake ever. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Baba, and welcome back to another really embarrassing story. So this story all takes place back in my grade 9 year. Now, in grade 9, I was only 14 years old, and being a 14-year-old isn't easy. I will say this much: in grade 9, I was hitting puberty, and I was getting a lot of different hormones, to the point where, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it was like I had my own hormone monster that made me keep falling for the temptations of life. You guys may know this because it's very common throughout, you know, growing up and hitting puberty, especially throughout middle school. But for me, it all happened in grade 9. I remember though, back when I was in grade 9, there was a game that was very commonly played and everyone played it. You guys probably know the game. It's called Grand Theft Auto 5. Now me, back when I was in grade 9, I wasn't allowed to get Grand Theft Auto 5 because my parents knew that it was not a game for, well, good kids to play. In a way, I guess you guys could say I had strict parents that did not want me playing games that was really not appropriate. Like, even for my parents to just buy me Call of Duty, it took so much convincing to make them understand that I wasn't gonna go out and start actually killing people IRL. Like, it was a lot of convincing I had to do just to get a basic video game that was rated M. But I remember one time I was in school hanging out with all my friends, and I remember one of my friends kept bringing up how Grand Theft Auto has these cool bank heists where you could literally go and rob banks. Now, I found this super cool, but obviously, like, I wasn't able to play because I didn't have the game. So obviously it sucked, and I remember every day they would keep talking about this game. Now me, I only got to know stuff about Grand Theft Auto through YouTube videos that I would secretly have to watch by myself. So I would join into the conversation, but I would only be able to talk about what I knew from watching other players play it, like Vanoss and all of them. Obviously, it was really upsetting, but I remember one time specifically, I was walking home from school with my buddy of mine, and he told me, yo, Bubba, I don't understand, bro. Like, why don't you just, like, tell your parents it's not a bad game? Dude, there's literally girls on the cover of the game. They're obviously not gonna believe me. Okay, well, then just get someone else to buy it for you. That's what I did, and my parents never found out. Now, this moment, when I heard about his idea, it was actually not a bad one. Like, why didn't I just get someone else to buy me the game? So I remember the next day, during the school day, I remember I walked up to one of my homies and said, yo, bro, you know what? I'm gonna buy the game today. I actually have a great idea. Wait, what do you mean? Did your parents finally let you get it? No, obviously not, but my plan is that I'm gonna go to GameStop GameStop and just hand someone my money to buy me the game. I remember he looks at me and shrugs and he's like, okay, if you say so, man, if it works, tell me. And he ended up leaving. Now, obviously that whole day I was excited just to go to the mall and just pick up this game. To be honest, it was like, you know, exciting for me knowing that I could actually have a copy of this game. But once I got to the mall and I actually, you know, waited by GameStop, I remember I saw this old guy. He had like a white beard and everything. So obviously he was old enough to buy me the game. So I walked up to him in the food court and said, hey, yo, bro, I was wondering, could you buy me this game? For some reason, I'm not old enough to get it, but it's a good game. My parents are just not here to pick it up for me. Is it cool if you just say you're my parent and get me the game? I remember he looks at me and he just like, you know, ends up saying, sure, why not? And he ends up standing up and going towards GameStop with the money I handed him, and he went to go pick up the game. But for some reason, GameStop has this rule where you have to be like 17 plus to buy 17 plus mature games. So I remember right as he picks up the game, he ends up looking at the physical copy of it and like the cover and everything, and he looks at me, and then afterwards he walks towards the counter. And right when he walks towards the counter, like this guy just kept staring at me, and then that's when the cashier noticed that this person was buying the game for me, and the cashier ended up telling the old man that was supposed to buy me the game, sir, you do realize this game has a lot of, you know, violence and a lot of graphic content. You do realize this game's not for kids, right? And at that moment, when he heard this cashier say that, instantly at that moment he starts worrying and starts like basically like confessing his sins, saying like, oh, like I was gonna buy the game for this kid, I didn't know it was a bad game, I hope I don't get in trouble. And well, one thing led to another. Mall security came and I got in trouble. I got in serious trouble, to the point where they actually ended up calling my parents that I was trying to buy a game that was not for my age. Yeah, my parents found out about it and I got in serious trouble. I remember for that weekend, I wasn't allowed my Xbox nor to play my Xbox whatsoever. But then something insane happened, where I remember the next day when I went to school, I ended up telling my friends like what happened and stuff. And obviously they all ended up laughing at me because, well, they all had the game that I couldn't have. And it got super annoying. But then out of nowhere throughout the school day, I ended up getting a text message from my mom. My mom ended up texting me, oh, Bubba, your grandma's gonna be coming to visit from the States, so she's gonna be staying with you guys for a bit while I go visit your auntie. And at that moment, I got really, really excited, because if there's one person in this world that would buy me anything without questioning it, it was my grandmother. Why? Well, for one of two reasons. One, she did not speak English properly, so if the cashier did tell her, you know, this had graphic content stuff, she would just think graphic means really cute photos. And on top of that, if she saw I wanted it bad enough, she would buy it even herself. Obviously, this is not a smart thing to do, and for anyone watching this video, even if my grandma's watching, no one should be taking advantage of other people, especially if they don't know English. Please, just be smart with your decisions. Don't do what I do. But going on with the story, I remember when I got home that day, I was super excited, and I ran up to my grandmother, and I told her everything about this game, Grand Theft Auto. I ended up telling her how it was a racing game, and how it was like, you know, basically a game where you're supposed to make money and buy nice cars. Obviously, I didn't tell her the rest of it about how, you know, you end up killing people in the game, and on top of that, you basically see women partially wearing nothing, but she didn't need to know that. So I remember that day when I told my grandma about it, she instantly just looked at me and said, okay, I'll buy you the game. And at that moment, I got super excited. I remember me and my grandma, we ended up getting into her car and we drove down to the mall. And when we got to the mall, I remember we went to the GameStop that had the game, and instantly I picked it up, I gave it to her, and me and her, we went to the front counter. Now the cashier did recognize me from before, but I did tell him that this was my grandmother and that, you know, my grandma's totally cool with me getting the game. So instantly at that moment, the cashier ends up saying the same thing that he told the old man from the other day. And well, my grandmother didn't understand a word he said, so she ends up looking at me saying, Bubba, what is he saying? Oh, grandma, he's just saying how, you know, the game's a good game for kids and how, you know, it'll teach me a lot about driving. Obviously, when me and my grandma communicated, by the way, it was only in Persian, so this cashier had no idea what I was saying. But my grandma just ended up nodding her head and smiling every time the cashier said something bad about this game. And well, one thing led to another, I ended up getting a copy of Grand Theft Auto. Now, obviously, I got super happy about this and I was super excited, but this is where the story gets really intense, because I remember that same day I ended up going home and I ended up downloading the game, and right away at that moment I ended up turning it on. And when I actually went into the game, one thing I started to realize was the loading screen had like this like girl on it, and then well, one thing led to another. There was also a lot more other types of content in that game, which I'm gonna say was definitely not for 14-year-old eyes. And well, of course, me being a 14-year-old that was hitting puberty, out of nowhere, one thing led to another. I got bricked. I got bricked to the point where I actually ended up going into the unicorn place. If you guys don't know what that is in GTA, then you should not be watching this video. But basically, it was a place in Grand Theft Auto where you could see inappropriate stuff. And I went in there and I ended up getting even more bricked to the point where I actually ended up taking off my pants and I started, I started beating my meat. It sounds really cringe, but honestly, it was just hormones. It's just all a part of growing up, I guess. But I remember as I was beating my meat, out of nowhere, my grandmother ends up up coming downstairs to check on me. And she sees me without my pants on, bricked to a video game. And she looks at me and says, Bubba, is this the game I bought you? At that moment, I freaked out and put on my pants as fast as I could. And I ended up telling my grandma, no, it's not. It was just a website. I'm sorry. I just have a lot going on. I was super nervous and did not know what to say, but luckily my grandma didn't know the difference between a computer and an Xbox, to the point where she kind of just ended up letting it go. But she did have a conversation with my parents later about how, you know, I'm growing up in a way. I don't know. It was the most awkward conversation in dinner ever. And to be honest, I lost my appetite that dinner time. But one thing was for sure, I was definitely super embarrassed about how my grandma caught me beating it to Grand Theft Auto. Like, who gets bricked over a video game? That is so weird. And I remember as I was beating my eggplant in my room, just thinking I was home alone and that no one was gonna bug me. Out of nowhere, I ended up hearing something down the hallway, but I thought that was impossible because no one was home, until my mom ends up walking into my room as my eggplant was out, and she looks at me saying, Bubba, what is that? My flashlight? Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba, and welcome back to another embarrassing but crazy story. Now, this story all takes place back when I was in high school, and this was actually back in my grade 12 year. Now, my grade 12 year was my grad year, and honestly, during grad, I will say it led to a lot of stress going through my bones. No joke, I think I was the most stressed that time, to the point where I think I was actually balding. Well, not actually, but you guys know what I mean. I was really stressed out, and honestly, I remember one of the things that would always help me relieve stress was basically doing the Devil's Tango. Because I would put my energy into something else and all my stamina and rage into a different hole in life. I guess I could say that. I don't really know. It sounds kind of crazy, but I did a lot of the Devil's Tango to get over it. And I remember there was one time back in my grade 12 year where we had one of the biggest test exams ever. I literally remember walking into my math class, and no joke, I sat down, and that's when my physics teacher ends up saying, okay, class, you guys have your final exam coming up, and this exam is worth 80% of your grade. So yeah, just keep up and don't slow down. At that point, when I heard 80% of my grade, I was in total shock. I don't know why teachers do this, but making a test worth 80% of your grade is crazy. So I remember me stressing out and just totally freaking out. I remember I went home that day and I just started studying. Knowing that this test was in 3 days was insane to me. So I remember the first day, I ended up sitting at home. I was playing video games, but at the same time, on my other screen that I had, I would just be looking at my physics papers and trying to remember as much as I could. One of the funny things I would actually try doing, and some of you guys could try this at home if you want, but I'm no tutor, so don't ever, you know, listen to me, to be fair. But one of the things I would do is I would study a paper, then afterwards I would play video games for, like, you know, a couple rounds of Call of Duty Team Deathmatch, and then I would go right back to my paper and see if I remembered most of it. If I didn't remember any of it, then I had to read it again until I fully got it into my brain. Because if even after video games I still remember my physics paper, there's no way I'm not gonna remember during the test. So I remember I kept doing this back and forth, and it actually led me to stressing out because one of my homies that were in the same class as me ends up calling me on Xbox, and we end up getting into an Xbox Live party chat, and he tells me, yo, Baba, did you study for the physics paper? I'm actually doing it right now as we speak. Wait, what? Dude, you're playing Call of Duty. Yeah, but like, I have this thing, just don't worry about it. Okay, well, I'm totally ready for it. Honestly, I think this physics test is gonna be super easy. I remember when he said that, I was so just confused on how he could say that, knowing that's worth 80% of our grade. But honestly, I didn't care. I ended up just basically ignoring him as he would speak, and honestly, it got to the point where I actually muted him in the party just so I can make sure I remembered everything throughout my physics paper, because I already had to remember playing Call of Duty and doing the paper, so I might as well just ignore one of the three. But going on, I remember after studying for, like, I want to say 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, I would say, I ended up laying down in bed, and I remember as I'm laying down, I'm just thinking to my head, like, bro, am I actually gonna pass this? Like, is this even possible? And I knew deep down that something was gonna go wrong, like something severely. You see, I have this thing where basically when I actually go up to a test and sit down and actually like start doing the test, my brain just blanks out. I don't know how many people have this condition. I don't know what it's called, but if you guys do know what I'm talking about, comment it down below. Because seriously, every time I would sit and get ready to do any test, from driver's license test to a normal just paper test at school, I just tend to blank out and totally forget everything that I learned. But going on with the story, I remember as I was laying down, the next day when I finally woke up, I remember I only got like 2 hours of sleep. And when I got to school that day, I remember my teacher, that was my physics teacher, ends up walking up to me in the middle of the hallway. He walks up to me saying, hey, Bubba, can I talk to you for a second in the classroom? Yeah, sure. I end up walking inside this classroom, and he looks at me and says, listen, Bubba, I'm not gonna lie. I'm actually worried for you when it comes to this physics test. I feel like you are not prepared for it, and I don't know if you're preparing enough for it. So I'm gonna host after school practices for not just you, but many other students where you guys can participate and learn together. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm down for that. Sure. Okay, perfect. So after school today, I'll see you, right? Yeah, you should, is what I told him. And then I ended up walking out of there. At that moment, I started to feel a lot worse, knowing that my own physics teacher didn't have faith in me. I didn't know what to think or what to say. So that day after school, I ended up going into the physics classroom. And you know what was the worst part? As I was sitting there and he was, you know, helping a bunch of students practice for the physics test, I felt like I was just blanking out right then and there. At that moment, I thought that I wasn't able to do anything. Like, I felt just dumb. I felt numb. Like, I felt silly being in that classroom. If anything, I felt like my method of studying worked way better than whatever he was doing. But at the same time, I went through the class, and when I got home that day, I remember I ended up just laying down on my bed thinking, honestly, I have a lot of stress in me. I just need to let it go. So that's when I remember I ended up basically, like, you know, messaging one of the chicks that were my sneaky links back when I was in grade 12. And I messaged her saying, yo, like, you down to come over? Oh, yeah, sure. I don't see why not. What time? Oh, like maybe like 2 or 3 hours. Oh, well, I have like this family thing, but I'll see if I can make it. Okay, perfect. Just like, let me know, is what I texted her. And afterwards, I ended up going back to playing video games. After like 3 to 4 hours go by, I ended up texting this girl again saying, yo, like, you still coming over? Question mark. Oh, honestly, I don't think I can make it, Bubba, is what she tells me. And I end up kind of getting annoyed because like getting denied by a sneaky link and also having a bunch of stress from this physics test was really getting to me. So what was the next best thing I did? Well, what any other teenage hormoned guy would do. I ended up laying on my bed, getting the lube out, getting the tissues out, and I basically prepare to beat my eggplant. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not even gonna be shy about it. You know, I said a lot crazier things on this channel, to be fair, but I was basically preparing for it. But that's when my mom ends up coming downstairs. Now, you guys are probably thinking, oh, is this when she walks in on you? No. She walks into my room, and I didn't whip out my eggplant yet, to be fully fair. Like, I was about to, but I didn't. And she just sees me laying in bed, and she says, oh, Bubba, are you feeling all right? Yeah, I'm fine. What's up? I was just gonna take a nap. Okay, well, me and your dad are leaving, and no one's gonna be home. Are you gonna be okay for dinner? Yeah, Mom, I'll be totally okay. Okay, good. I will talk to you later. At that point, my mom goes upstairs, and right as I hear the front door shut and my parents leave the driveway, that's when I whip out my eggplant, and I start going ham. Okay, no joke. I'm going on the Devil's Hub, and I'm just searching up everything I can to basically relieve all my stress. And knowing how much stress I had built up, no joke, I was beating my thing for a while. And that's when I realized half an hour goes by, and I'm still bricked. And I remember I have my headphones on, and I'm watching this Devil's Hub video. And as I'm watching it, I'm not gonna lie, I usually skip the intro, but this one was actually interesting. Like, I had a really cool build up to it, so I was watching it. And as I'm holding my eggplant, I end up hearing something down the hallway. Now, I thought it was like something in my mind or something that, like, you know, was a part of the Devil's Hub film I was watching. But as I'm just laying there, I remember I end up continue watching. And when it finally got to the good part, I start beating my eggplant, and boom, I see my mom hovering over me saying, Bubba, what is that? Mom! At that moment, I start covering myself up, and I'm freaking out. And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing here? I brought you sushi. Me and your father went for sushi. What are you doing, Bubba? Mom, I'm under a lot of stress, and I'm pressure, and Mom, don't you knock? Bubba, I did 3 times. You didn't answer. But Mom, like I'm in the middle of something. What are you doing? Mom, what do you mean? What am I doing? Just get out. At that moment, my mom just like drops the food and just like leaves my room. And I start panicking, and I start getting nervous because my mom saw my eggplant after like almost like 7 years of not seeing it. I know it sounds really insane, but you gotta understand, my mom has walked in on me before, but not in my full form, you know, as like an almost adult, which is a grade 12 student in my opinion. And yeah, honestly, it was really awkward eating that sushi, knowing that my mom saw my eggplant because of this sushi, but I ate it anyways. And I'm not gonna lie, the next day during my physics test, I flunked it. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I failed physics that day. It was actually really depressing, but honestly, my mom wasn't upset about it because she knew I was under a lot of stress to the point where I was beating my eggplant. But anyways, guys, if you guys don't believe the story is true, then fall for embarrassing stories just like this one. Peace out, guys.